if the birth rate stays the same in South Korea, for every 100 people that exist now, there will only be 12 grandchildren. And so very quickly, a country can die off. So yeah, it's something to be thinking about. But then on the other hand, it's like, what can you actually do?
Welcome to the Unspeakable podcast. I'm your host, Meghan Daum. Before we get to my interview with Rob Henderson, a couple of announcements. The first is a reminder that on September 3rd in New York City, I will be in conversation with novelist and columnist Lionel Shriver, who was just a guest on the podcast a few weeks ago. We will be talking about my new book, The Catastrophe Hour. I'm holding it up here if you're watching on video. And also Lionel's books and columns in The Spectator and all of her ideas. This is happening at the Village Underground Comedy Club at 6 p.m. The link to buy tickets is in the show notes, and you can also go to meghandaum.com/events. What else do you need to know? The doors open at 5:15. We'll be selling books there. The show starts at 6. We'll be out of there by 7:30 or so because the comedy is starting at 8. It's going to be a great New York night. If you purchase your ticket soon, you will get a discount by using promo code Catastrophe18 at checkout. I would love to see you there if you're in New York. The second thing you may remember me talking about a lot in New York is the big Unspeakeasy co-ed weekend, October 11th and 12th. This is our small gathering for big ideas, featuring numerous speakers, Rob Henderson among them. We'll also have John McWhorter, Mike Pesca of The Gist, Andrew Hartz of the Open Therapy Institute, who will be a guest in a couple of weeks, Alana Newhouse from Tablet, Carol Hooven, who was a guest a few weeks ago, all your favorite people in one place, and you can interact with them totally off the record. This is unlike anything you've ever done before, and unlike anything I've ever done before. Go to theunspeakeasy.com/NYC to find out about that. Okay. My guest is Rob Henderson. He is a social psychologist and a political and cultural commentator. He is probably best known for coining the term luxury beliefs, which refers to opinions and ideas, usually fashionable ones, that elevate or flatter the social status of the upper class while potentially harming those in the lower classes. Rob himself grew up in the foster care system in California, which he wrote about in his 2024 book, Troubled. And he talked about that here last year. I brought him back because I wanted to hear about what he's been thinking about lately. And in this conversation, we discuss many things, including the so-called, and in fact, very real, mating crisis, the question of why young people seem increasingly uninterested in partnering and starting families, and in some cases leaving the house. We also talk about the emergence of Zoran Mamdani, the young progressive candidate for mayor in New York City, who is pretty much presumed to win, and is also pretty much exhibit A of what it means to hold luxury beliefs. Rob recently moved to New York City. Finally, I relay some questions from my Substack readers, which Rob answers quite thoughtfully. It's a great conversation, as is the policy now. If you are not yet a paying subscriber, you're going to hear about half of it. To hear the whole thing, become a paying subscriber at theunspeakablepodcast.com. I no longer hold the luxury belief that I can release everything for free as much as I would like to. Here is our conversation. Enjoy. Rob Henderson, welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, Meghan. Thanks. Great to be here.
You were here in February of 2024, I believe, talking about your book, Troubled, a memoir of family, foster care, and social class. A lot has happened in the world, and for you since then. You're incredibly prolific on Substack. You're writing and podcasting there about a variety of issues. Your coinage of the term luxury beliefs, of course, has gained a lot of traction and continues to has a lot of legs, that concept, especially in the so-called heterodox or sense-making community. I know you're really interested in human behavior and how it intersects with politics and the economy. what do you find yourself thinking about the most these days? Are there recurring themes that kind of come back to you as you're lying awake at night, trying to figure out how to fix the world?
Yeah, well, the luxury beliefs idea, it's one of these things where I coined it and wrote about it in late 2019. And at the time, I was ensconced in higher education. I was at the University of Cambridge. I had just graduated from Yale the year before. And so I was mostly pointing out things I was seeing at elite universities, and slowly started to creep out into other institutions as well. And then early 2020, there's COVID, there's the lockdowns, and I think no one's going to care about luxury beliefs. We have this deadly pandemic, and people aren't going to care about all the sort of cultural squabbles now because, there's this illness out there. And then summer 2020 hits, and then it's like, oh, luxury beliefs are back. And then,
thank God.
Yeah. Well, then 2024, the election, Trump gets elected, and people were asking me, well, is this the death of luxury beliefs because Trump wins a second election? He's in a second term. And I think, well, maybe we're seeing this tide shift. It does seem like we've passed peak woke, as other, astute commentators have pointed out. But then Zoran Mamdani wins the primary in New York City, and he is, if you look at his social media feed, he was all in on wokeness. He's, an avowed socialist. He quotes Marx sometimes in his social media pages about seizing the means of production and that kind of thing. So, I sometimes lose faith in my own idea, and then reality continues to support, well, maybe there is something there. But then other ideas that I've been thinking about, the growing gender divide in politics. I wrote a piece last year for the Boston Globe about this, reposted on my Substack. And then more recently, I wrote this long form piece for City Journal, attempting to further explore that idea because last summer, the election hadn't yet occurred. And so we were relying on survey data, polling data, showing these very interesting patterns of young women shifting further to the left, men, depending on what survey you're looking at, maybe shifting more to the right. And I'm talking about self-identified political orientation, not who they voted for, but just, are you a liberal or are you a conservative? And women are much more likely to identify as liberal than men. And then the election happens. And then since then, we have actual voting data on this. So very interesting.
Okay. I definitely want to drill down on that. And I do want to talk about the Mamdani phenomenon maybe later in this conversation, especially because that is something we're going to be talking about at the Unspeakeasy weekend that you're going to be part of. I think that's going to be right ahead of the election. So I don't think we're going to be able to avoid that one. And there's certainly a lot there. But yeah, let's just pause on the gender divide here when it comes to politics and just kind of like overall feelings about being in the world. I mean, I think I said to you earlier, I, for whatever reason, consume a lot of Manosphere content. Okay. It's like a sort of sadomasochistic thing I do, I guess.
Well, how far into it are you? Are you like when you say, like, are you talking like Jordan Peterson? Are you talking Andrew Tate?
That's old
are you
stuff.
talking?
I'm not, yeah. I mean, Jordan Peterson, I mean, I've been following and writing about since, 2015 or so, since, for 10 years at least. No, he's kind of he's your kind of, kind of
fatherly dad advice.
Manosphere.
He's like the gateway drug.
Yeah, and actually, this point has been made many times, but if Jordan Peterson had been accepted into kind of mainstream dialogue, we would not have ended up with Andrew Tate, arguably, because Jordan Peterson was saying a lot of things that a lot of people needed to hear, and he was actually saying them pretty respectfully and pretty intelligently, at least for the first couple of years of his career in this iteration. But anyway, I don't even know who I'm following. Like, I'm fascinated by like the sort of romanticization of the trad stuff. Like I'm like, I see a lot of these guys, they're anonymous accounts. I don't know if they're bots or I don't know if they're like engagement farmers from Pakistan or whatever, but, they have these like AI images of some milkmaid, just your beautiful wife, like standing over the sink in a prairie dress and, with, baby on her hip and like, these guys saying like, why can't we just go back to that? And there does seem to be a tremendous despair among a certain population that has led to like a real genuine interest and like just unrealistic set of fantasies about the way things used to be. And so I wonder if you could sort of help unpack some of that.
A thought just occurred to me, and this is one of the things I'm surprised it hasn't crossed my mind sooner, is it's always the woman, right? Like the woman on a beautiful piece of land with a flowery dress, with the baby on her hip, maybe some churned butter behind her, but you never see the man in those photos, especially man by himself, right? Like, I don't know, tilling the fields or covered in sweat and grime, like what you
working
have to do as a man. Right, or working in a factory.
Working in a meat packing plant. Well,
right, a slaughterhouse. Yeah,
that's hot. I mean, I think a lot of women secretly they secretly lust after a guy working in a slaughterhouse. No, well, I mean, I think sometimes you do see the kind of lumberjack guy. You see this kind of family tableau. So you've got the woman in the sundress, and maybe I have seen the kind of tilling the field. I mean, it's AI, so he might have like an extra hand or something like that, So, which is good.
Fingers.
I mean, you want a guy with 3 hands if you're going to be working on the farm. Everybody should have extra AI.
That would
generated
be why aren't we working on that?
Yeah, I'd say. But yeah, I mean, what do you like? Do you talk to young men? I mean, do you have a sense like really what they're thinking, or even if these are like real people generating the stuff?
Well, so the ones you're describing, I don't know if they're, are these bots? Are they not? Like the people who don't have real identities attached to their Twitter profile pages, where it's like a avatar of a Greek statue, and they're just what the kids call shit posting and harassing and mocking people with larger follower accounts. But there are people who are public or semi-public. I'm thinking of, there's this guy, he calls himself like, quote, the rational male. And apparently he's self-published a series of books about like how to date, how to strategically win women over. It's sort of pickup artist, red pill stuff. And he has a large following online, and he was on Mikhaila Peterson's podcast a couple of years ago, probably the biggest podcast he's ever been on. And I thought, okay, he's kind of an aggressive, angry, middle-aged man. Seems like he's had a lot of romantic difficulties in his life. But I gave this talk at a college 3 or 4 months ago, and this young kid, good-looking kid, probably 21 years old, 22, he's a senior in college, probably just graduated now, comes up to me, he was in the audience, and says like, hey, Rob, have you read this Rational Male guy? Like, I found he was really helpful and blah, blah. And I thought like, wow, young guys. And he wasn't weird. He didn't look like the prototypical incel-y basement dwelling guy. He looked like a normal, like if you just saw this guy in public, you would think, oh, he's probably pretty successful. He's probably pretty happy as far as, a 21-year-old guy would go, how you would perceive them. And so I think there is this crossover. Now, when I talk to young guys, they will reference some of these writings. They'll send me tweets or ask me questions about this stuff. And I think it makes sense. What you said earlier, like, Jordan Peterson filled this void for a lot of guys who maybe weren't getting that much advice from older men in their lives. They didn't know where to turn, so they go online. And you see this psychologist delivering this advice that seems reasonable and helpful. And then he kind of, goes away or is vilified. And then they're trying to, guys are trying to find like the more potent, more extreme, more radical, more interesting, the arcane knowledge that they're not getting from the mainstream. And then I think they often go a little too far with it. And maybe that is also, helps to explain why we're seeing the growing divide in politics and dating and everything else.
Right. So, okay, I have seen Rational Male on X. I have not, I have not, done any kind of, I have not dived into his work, but I mean, we don't have to, maybe I should have him on the podcast if he'll come on. We don't have to get too far in the weeds, but like, what kind of advice does he give? I'm just curious. Do you know?
No. Well, I muted him on Twitter a long time ago because anytime I would post anything related to gender, politics, sex, relationships, he was like that's probably how he built his following at first, was just being a reply guy and being very confrontational and hostile with his comments. And so I muted him. But from what I understand, he will say like, oh, there's this long-running conflict with men and women, and either you get what you want or she gets what she wants. And he'll overinterpret findings from evolutionary psychology and twist them into something that fits with his agenda. And I think that's disappointing too. Like I was in San Francisco last year. I hosted this happy hour meetup thing, and this young woman comes up to me and she says, Rob, sometimes you talk about evolutionary psychology on your Substack, but isn't that stuff like kind of nonsense where like it's like women are like this and men are like that, and it completely ignores the nuance. And I think, well, I asked her, where are you getting your evolutionary psychology information? And she says, I'll scroll on Instagram or Twitter or whatever. And I'm like, that's not evolutionary. Yeah, there's no evolutionary psychology journal of Twitter. That's not the actual. That's not where you're going to find the actual original research done by careful scholars and academics. And but you will see guys like, this rational male guy and other, pseudonymous influencers who will take those findings and then twist them and caricaturize them, where if you look at the original studies, they'll say, men on average tend to behave like this and women on average and blah, blah. They'll couch their language in very careful terms. And then you go on social media and it's like, scientists discover that women are evil or men are being screwed over somehow. And it's just really, really ugly.
Well, but it does work. The algorithm likes that stuff.
Yeah.
A lot. I mean, I think part of the reason I find it interesting is because there are kernels of truth there. I mean, we do have women. I mean, people have heard me say this on this podcast ad nauseum. They're going to college at a higher rate. They're achieving. They're buying their own homes. Like, women in this time in human civilization, it's unprecedented, actually technically don't need men to do anything. Like, they don't need men to, keep a roof over their heads. They don't need men to have a baby, actually. They can outsource all of this. And the effect of this has been not just the devaluation of men, but almost the sort of like functional obsolescence of them. I mean, obviously I'm talking in very general, extreme terms, but I can totally imagine being a young guy, and if you're spending all your time online and you're seeing two modes of women, you're seeing social justice girls with green hair yelling about toxic masculinity, and you're seeing OnlyFans girls. And if you're seeing nothing in between, it would be very easy to go down this road.
Yeah, I think that's right. And when you're a young guy trying to figure things out, and you're trying to find information that will help you, but that will also make you feel good about yourself or will help to explain the world. And I think it's always a tough sell to get people to take responsibility for their own circumstances, their own misfortune. And when people are peddling, it's the opposite sex's fault, or it's society's fault or something, it's just much easier to believe than, practical concrete steps you can take on your own to improve your life. And I think a lot of guys are just spending too much time online. It's frying their brain. And, on the other hand, I sympathize with it, because I get that, where else can you turn? And there's been this, generational shift. It's been pretty dramatic, I think. And then especially over the last maybe 10 years or so, with the rise of Me Too, and with social media and dating apps and smartphones. And you can't really go to, an older person for advice. If you go to your parents or someone, they're not going to understand how much things have changed since the rise of all of this technology. And so where do you go? And you're seeing influencers who have, and the way that they've built their following, there's this perverse incentive. If you say extreme and outrageous things, that'll break through the noise and get a lot of attention. And what I think a lot of people, especially young people, will misunderstand is that the very fact that something is extreme and outrageous and atypical, that's why it's gotten so much attention.
Yeah.
That's not the norm. That's not. And so when people post something or tweet something, and it gets a lot of attention, people mistakenly think, that's the norm. That's what everyone thinks, or that's how everyone behaves. But that's actually not the case. Sometimes you'll see like guys will share a screenshot of a tweet or something of a woman saying, "Oh my God, I can't believe this guy asked me for my number out in public. How awful," something like that. And then guys will take that and say, "Oh, aha, women hate us. Women don't want us to talk to them. Women don't want us to approach them." And then they complain that they can't find a good man. What did they expect? This kind of thing. But it's that's one woman who phrased her tweet in such a way as to get lots of attention. Very few women are going to tweet the opposite of like, hey, a really nice guy came up to me and we had a great conversation and I gave him my number.
Well,
That's
are
not
tweeting
tweet.
it, but it doesn't rise to the surface. Perhaps all those tweets are buried in the bottom of the well there somewhere. Yeah,
It's not going to get rewarded by the algorithm. Yeah.
Right. So you're very good at laying this out. You've studied these kinds of dynamics. You've been writing about it a lot. How are you positioning yourself these days? Do you want to be somebody who is like, I don't want to say an advice giver, but do you want to actively try to help people? How much of a crisis do you think this is? And how much of do you see your role as like trying to change the way things are going?
I mean, ideally, I would like to help people. It's not the first thing on my mind, honestly. I write about things that interest me. I talk about things that I'm interested in. And if there are some practical takeaways that people can glean from it, that's great. But really, I just want to point things out and to get people to maybe reconsider some of the things that they're seeing. Because it's so easy to fall into sort of poor thinking habits and sort of be misled by what you're seeing online or what you're seeing from extreme, personalities and influential or influencers. So, but my role, what is my role? I think just writing and thinking and speaking and trying to be as truthful and as close to actual reality as possible as someone who, I guess, occupies both of these spaces where I'm very online. I spend a lot of time online and speaking with young people, but then I also spend a good deal of time reading books and thinking and reading studies, and I'll, download papers and read them. And people think that I'm, like I'm crazy for this. Like even I'll read podcast transcripts, and I have other influencer friends who are writers and podcast hosts, and more so the podcast bros. When I tell them I'll read a podcast transcript, they're like, "What? Like, why would you spend all that time reading?" And I think I can absorb the information faster and in a way that sticks with my mind.
Are you the human ChatGPT? Is that what you're saying?
I listen to podcasts too. I love listening to podcasts. But if it's something that's information dense, I prefer to read it because it sticks better, I think. And so I try to, and this is like intrinsically rewarding for me to learn new things. And so I try to, combine all these things, what I'm learning, what I'm reading, what I'm taking in ideally from high quality sources, and then hopefully can translate them into a more accessible way to young people who, for better or worse, they're getting their info on Instagram Reels or on TikTok or on X or whatever.
Do you find when you're reading the transcripts that you catch mistakes and things that just aren't true? Because this is the thing with podcasts. People just speak off the cuff, obviously. That's why people like them. But it's so easy to just say something that's patently false, get something wrong, misspeak, either because you're sloppy or you've like literally just misspoken. Part of the reason I don't publish transcripts of this podcast on my Substack is that's where people get in trouble, like that's where I have found like somebody can get kind of canceled or in hot water because something that was clearly, if you listen to it, it was elliptical or something. It was clear that it was clear what they were saying, even though they maybe said the wrong word or the wrong fact or whatever. If it's there in the transcript, it's a totally different ballgame. And it makes me nervous.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. It can be easy to misquote something or if you're relying on sort of top of your mind knowledge, you can miscite a statistic or something. But no, I don't worry too much about that. Because like I'm not necessarily talking about Substack. I mean, I'll look at like Ross Douthat on the New York Times, his podcast. They publish a transcript.
Well, he has fact checkers,
right?
Yes.
Yeah. And they'll usually make a note of it. And then if any statistic, like even if it is on Substack or a source where they don't have fact checkers or transcript without fact checkers, I'll double check it if something seems dubious. But no, I haven't had any issues there. But I get what you're saying, and it is like very easy, I think, for people to take screenshots or mislead people or something like that. Yeah,
it's easier to find rather than having to sit through the whole thing and wait till the moment where the person said the thing where you're going to get them. Yeah. Well, how worried are you about like the future in terms of people not having families, people not getting together. There's a lot of discourse about population crisis. There's a whole world of pronatalists, which I think is actually fascinating. And, I'm actually somebody who did not want to have children, yet I still feel that more people should have children. It's sort of like babies for thee, but not for me. Are we overblowing this problem, or do you think it's really something to be concerned about?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, well, because during the 60s and 70s, the concern was overpopulation, and Paul Ehrlich wrote that book about the population bomb.
Yeah, that was fake news, as it turned out.
Right, and he made a series of predictions that did not turn out to be true, and now we're heading in the opposite direction. And I wonder if this is, can we actually do anything? Because some people will hold Paul Ehrlich and his companions responsible for the decline in people having children, that there was this widespread cultural awareness that we were killing the planet, and so people were choosing not to have children. But then can we go the other way and say, actually, without people around, people and societies will start to deteriorate, and humanity won't have a future? Can we use that as a way to encourage people to have kids? I don't think that we're actually overblowing it. I mean, if you look at South Korea, for example, assuming, because this can happen very rapidly. This is something that people misunderstand, like how math works, how the statistics work, where if the birth rate stays the same in South Korea, for every 100 people that exist now, there will only be 12 grandchildren. And so very quickly, a country can die off. So, yeah, wow. It's something to be thinking about. But then on the other hand, it's like, what can you actually do? What do you do? I mean, there have been economic incentives that have been met with limited success. I think Hungary has had the most success with this, but even they've only lifted the birth rate like 0.2 or 0.3. So you get like an extra third of a child per married couple.
Oh, that would be hard to raise a third of a child. What did they do? What were the policies that they put in place?
I think there was some tax relief, and then some direct cash transfers for people who have newborns and that kind of thing. But it seems like people don't really respond, because South Korea had the same policy. I think Japan's tried it, various countries in Western Europe. And this is the kind of back and forth right now, I think, in the U.S., where a lot of people on the left say, well, people aren't having kids because they can't afford it, and so why don't we make life easier for mothers, maternity leave, this kind of thing. But the Scandinavian countries have all of that in place. They're extremely generous with maternity leave, with tax breaks, with, free education, tertiary education. You can essentially go to university for free if you live in a country like Denmark. Very generous social safety net, and the birth rate there is roughly the same as the U.S., if not, I think, slightly lower. Mm-hmm. And all of those incentives have not lifted the birth rate for them. So it doesn't really seem to be an economic issue.
I feel like you really have to consider the possibility that for whatever reason, people just don't want to have kids. I mean, the idea that people were, scaling down on the family size because they were concerned about overpopulation or climate or anything, I mean, that's a little bit optimistic. I really don't think people were ever that selfless. Like, I mean, the idea like, oh, I read Paul Ehrlich and I really want to have 4 kids, but I'm going to just have 1 because I want to do my part here. Like, people aren't that magnanimous. You know what I mean? People are inherently selfish. And so, I mean, but what do you think it is? Because at the same time, I do think there's a lot of young people who feel really like they were sold a bill of goods by a lot of kind of like post-sexual revolution cultural trends, and it's hurt them. I mean, there have been downstream unintended consequences that came from the women's movement and stuff like that, and they're super sad about a lot of things, and I can see feeling like they want to do that, and for whatever reason they can't. So, like, what do you think the mix is here?
Yeah, well, there seems to be at least some cultural component, and it's hard to say. Like, oh, no one's going to say, oh, well, I heard this and read this book, and therefore I changed my mind. But I mean, I think that it does have some impact. I mean, I think the broader cultural messaging. I just read this piece from Mary Harrington, whose work I know you're familiar with, and she wrote about this in one of her recent Substack posts about how she had sort of through cultural osmosis absorbed this idea that being a mother was low status,
right?
That you're sort of wasting your potential, your ambition, your ability to achieve great things, and then you're just sort of locked at home with the child, being a non-productive member of society, of not contributing to the economy, and so on. And she doesn't anywhere in that piece, at least, point out, oh, someone like told me, hey, being a mother's low status. Like, no one will actually say that outright, but it's just sort of in the air, in the culture, through the images that we're exposed to, through the ideas where, what are you applauded for? Well, you're applauded from going to college and getting a great job and making a lot of money and getting promotions. And no one really seems to applaud you in the same way for having kids. The movies and pop culture and TV shows, it's not really lauded in the same way. You're not celebrated for motherhood in the way that you are for working hard and being a successful young woman in a major city. So I think that all of those things do have some non-trivial impact here. And then having kids is hard. Right? Like, if you want people to do hard things, I think it has to be culturally rewarded. You do have to confer some special esteem on the person for doing this difficult thing. Like, I know this is a weird analogy here, but I think there's something similar going on with why young people aren't getting driver's licenses. Because I remember initially, you've probably seen some of the stats on this. I wrote this piece for the Free Press, I think last year, a while back, about this amazing dramatic decline in Gen Z getting licenses. And this decline started when everything else started to get weird, which is like 2010 to 2012, like smartphones and social media, that kind of thing. Gene Twangy and Jonathan Haidt talk about this, about, around 2010, Zoomer started to get weird. And now, dramatic decline in willingness to get a driver's license. And I remember at first thinking this is very strange, because when I was a teenager, I was probably the last, like the millennials, the last group to want to get a license, get away from your parents.
On your birthday, you go to the DMV and get your license.
Yes. And it's like a rite of passage, and you're like, you're just like admiring the card with your photo on it and showing your friends, and trying to find ways to sneak out at night and go on dates and hang out with your friends and go to parties. And now that doesn't really exist. And I thought, okay, well, this is weird. But then it's like, well, is that weird, or is wanting to drive a car weird? Because driving a car, if you're a naive teenager who's never really done anything difficult, and now you have to get behind this, 2,000-pound piece of metal and go on the road with a bunch of people who you don't know and don't trust. And it can be nerve-wracking to put yourself in that situation. And if there's no payoff for it, if you don't feel like you're going to be able to get a date or impress your friends or go to parties, if the party's on Snapchat, the party's on Instagram, you don't need to get a girlfriend or a boyfriend or whatever anymore, because you can just go online and look at porn or something, then why get a driver's license? So, initially you think, well, not wanting it is weird, but actually maybe having kids in the same way, it's a very difficult thing to do. It's hard, it's expensive, it takes time. And you better use that time for other things, maybe. And so people just don't want to do it. Why did people ever have kids to begin with?
Especially because you have to drive them around if you have kids. It's something you spend a lot of time doing. Well, okay, that's a really interesting analogy. I have to think about that. I think that makes sense. Mm-hmm. One thing, though, is you can still, if you don't have a driver's license, you can still get around. You can take a Waymo. We didn't have Ubers when we were getting our licenses, right? So if you didn't drive yourself, there was really no alternative other than taking public transportation, right? So there was so I think that the Uber phenomenon, and certainly like the Waymo phenomenon, the self-driving Ubers, have kind of filled that niche. But I think you're right. There is, if you actually look at it rationally, it's like driving is very dangerous. The chances of getting into an accident are pretty big. I don't know, like in my generation, there was so much reckless driving and drunk driving that I think, it was pretty common for every graduating class of the high school to have at least one kid who died in a drunk driving accident. So That's so interesting. But
in my high school, it was texting and driving, and that was back when texting was still new. So there were no public service announcements about not texting and driving. This was 2007, and one of my female classmates was texting and driving, and she died. And so up until recently, everyone knew someone like that. In both cases, also technology, right? Like what you're saying, that in the past you needed kids to work to sort of preserve the household, the local economy. And now you don't need that anymore. That technology has made us so prosperous that we don't need kids to work.
You need them to do your technology, though. You need them to show you how to use technology. You needed kids to first it was like to know which remote control to use for the TV, and now you need them for...
How do I open the door handle to my Waymo?
Look, the only reason that I wish I had kids is to help me with like the podcast and getting these recordings set up. But I mean, I want to get back to this, like the sort of status of motherhood. I mean, I think Mary Harrington is really onto something, and I think that resonates with a lot of people. But do you think that that's primarily a professional managerial class phenomenon? Like, this goes hand in hand with, class aspiration. And I mean, I certainly know a lot of people. I have made this argument many times that you just make, but I've also had people say, well, that's not true. You're talking about a very specific demographic. Like, you still have people who are in working class communities, immigrant communities, for instance, that still really care about having kids, and that is what girls want to do, and their mothers are nagging them, where's my grandchildren? And so that still goes on.
I think they might have an outdated impression of working class communities now. I mean, immigrants may be something else because they're bringing part of their culture with them, and you see that immigrants tend to have higher fertility rates than native-born U.S. citizens. But then after a generation or two, they kind of assimilate to the birth rate of the U.S. But actually, The Economist ran a really interesting analysis of this. It came out, I think, early last year, which found that the birth rate among college-educated women hasn't actually changed all that much since the 1990s, the early 90s. So this was, maybe 30, 35 years ago. They're delaying child rearing till later in life, but ultimately their fertility rate isn't that different. It has slightly declined, but not by much. But for non-college educated women, low-income women, that's actually that group is actually responsible for the majority of the decline in birth rates. And these analysts at The Economist suggest that the reason for this is because marriage has declined so much in these communities. Most people, regardless of education or socioeconomic status, if you ask them if they want to have kids, most people say yes, and then most people want to get married before they have kids. And my interpretation of this analysis is that there was this interesting generational shift where, a couple of generations ago, generation or two ago, like single mothers, teenage mothers, women in working class communities who are maybe they were cohabiting with the child of the father. But, research has consistently shown that most cohabiting couples, especially in working class communities, they split before the child is 5 years old. Whereas if they're married, they tend to stay together. So cohabitation did not seem to replace marriage, but that was the hope for a lot of these women that, okay, well, if they're going to, get with a guy, they're not married, but then she gets pregnant and they're going to try to live together for a little while, but not get married. And then maybe they'll get married later on, but that usually didn't happen. Those kids grew up and they did not ever witness what a functional relationship looked like. Marriage was not really an aspiration in the same way. Their mothers, who were, for most of their life, single moms, probably aren't pushing them in the same way to get married and to have kids, right? Whereas that woman's mother, the woman from a generation ago, she was pushing her to do so.
So the kids that were born in the 80s that you're describing, do they say they not want to have kids? And like, how seriously do we take them? Like, how old are they at this point? I'm trying to think.
I see. So they did have kids. So
sorry,
my cousins.
Excuse me. Okay, those kids, sorry, I'm going to say this again. So the kids that are the most recent generation in this lineage.
Oh, I see.
Are they saying they want to have kids? Are they too young to be taken seriously one way or the other? Like, where do you see them going?
Yeah, what's interesting is that so a lot of them, they're late teens and early 20s now. And their parents, my cousins, a lot of them had kids in their late teens and early 20s. That was like very common among non-college educated working class moms 20 and 30 years ago. Now, I don't think they have any interest in like the sex recession is real. They just don't really seem that interested in relationships or marriage or family formation. They're not even thinking about kids. It's just not really on their radar in the same way as, a generation ago. And it's interesting to see. I mean, some of them, they'll talk about, some fling they had on Hinge or Tinder or something, but they're nothing long-term, nothing serious at all.
And I want to actually ask you something about that. But before I forget, I want to ask you about divorce rate, because the conventional wisdom for a long time was like 50% of marriages end in divorce. And I don't know if that was like never technically true. And I don't think it's true now. But is it mostly not true now because people aren't getting married to begin with?
Yes. Yeah. I think that's right. So Brad Wilcox had that recent piece in The Atlantic about how the divorce rate is actually, I think, the lowest it's been in decades. And which is, generally good news. I think it's something like 30-something%. I think the famous statistic everyone knows is 50%, but it's down into the 30s, I believe. And the reason is, the types of people who would get married today are people who've really thought it out, much more conscientious, committed, more sort of educated, higher socioeconomic status. Whereas in the past, everyone got married. People, with a range of conscientiousness, impulse control, willingness to commit, that kind of thing. This goes into my luxury beliefs idea that actually if you aren't inclined to commit, you actually need sort of cultural reinforcement from your society's elites to tell you that there are better and worse ways to live your life, especially if there are kids involved. But yeah, it's interesting now that marriage increasingly seems to be a bit of a luxury good for upper and upper middle class people. That it's like a capstone. I've heard some social scientists refer to this like a capstone in your life,
versus
where
the cornerstone. Well, Brad talks about this. I mean, Kay Heimowitz and Brad Wilcox. This. I think. I mean, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure they sort of coined the framing of the capstone marriage versus the cornerstone marriage. So, if you're a professional managerial class, kind of, post 80s sort of couple, you're going to wait until you've made law partner and done all this stuff. And then like the cherry on top of your life is going to be that you got married. It's this kind of, as opposed to the farmstead, the cornerstone of your life is your marriage. I mean, but I want to this sort of paradox here. I want to understand, because I think about this a lot. So you're saying that like your cousins, the generation that, are in their late teens, early 20s right now, they're not interested in relationships. They kind of, conduct their lives on screen. That is something that we see quite a bit. We also see so many men and women, young, who are really, really desperate for a relationship. Like these girls want a boyfriend so badly, and they're angry. The reason they're starting to hate men and they go on, make their TikTok videos about some horrible date is because they want this so badly and they're not getting it. And the boys also want it so badly and they're not getting it, which is making them angry and thinking that all the girls are on OnlyFans and they should go their own way to Thailand or whatever it is. I mean, so they do want it. Do you think that people are just they want this thing and it just seems so unattainable that they can't even sort of admit it to themselves?
No, I think that, most people want a steady, committed partner that they like. But it's hard. It's hard now. The cultural script for how to form a relationship is, unsteady. People don't really know what to expect anymore. You've probably heard this term, situationships.
Yeah, I like that portmanteau, actually.
Yeah, what are we?
Yes.
But no one wants to bring that up anymore. And I think there was this interesting backlash. You probably remember the cool girl monologue from Gone Girl and Gillian Flynn. But around that time, the early mid 2010s, there had been kind of 10 plus years of mocking women for wanting commitment from men. Right. I remember this. I was, growing up during that time and seeing TV shows and movies of a sitcom of like, group of guys, and they're like, oh, she wants me to lock it down. And then like the laugh track would go off, and, it was like, how dare she want commitment? And I think women, a lot of them, young women at the time, watched this and thought like, okay, well, I want to be the cool girl. I don't want to lock a guy in. I don't want to pressure him. And now we've reached this point where like no one wants to even broach the subject of commitment because women were conditioned, or maybe they, out of some sense of not wanting to fall into a cliche or traffic in gender stereotypes of I don't want to be the woman who asks that question. And then men who were also kind of taught to be, not want to be needy, to be seen as cool. And there's all those sort of pick up red pill stuff of like, you never want to make her think like you need her.
No, you want to be the opposite. You want to neg her. You want to be mean.
Right. And so if both genders are like this, like, okay, if you have one gender who's like trying to pull away and the other one who's saying like you need to commit, then maybe things can happen. But if both are like, oh, I'm never going to be the one to broach this subject, I'm never going to be the one to ask, then of course there's going to be these issues. But then I also think like a lot of people want relationships, but then if you're not in an environment that cultivates it and prevents you from acting on those higher desires and principles, it can be hard too. Like, I mean, I just had a conversation the other day with a guy who's 31. He works in advertising, really successful guy. And he's telling me like now he has a girlfriend and he really likes her, but he spent the last 10 years just like sleeping with every woman who would possibly have him. And he's a good looking guy who was successful in a lot of cases. And now he like broke his brain because he's like, wow, I have a great woman. And like, but I've spent 10 years behaving this way. And now I don't know how to like not do that. And so, it can be hard.
Wait, we used to call that sowing your wild oats and then growing up and settling down. There is a paradigm for that.
Yeah, I think that model works like pre-smartphone, pre-Tinder, pre-dating apps, because there was like an upper bound. Even if you were a super good looking, super successful guy, if you still had to go out to bars and meet women, you're still going to get rejected more often than not. But with the rise of dating apps, like if you're a good looking guy who makes a lot of money, you can line up like 2 dates, 3 dates in a day. Whereas in the past, you might be able to get 2 or 3 dates in a week. Right. And so I think like that the amount of volume has changed a lot, and that probably is messing with people's brains in a way that, we're still not yet, we don't know the consequences of that.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's a good point. Oh my gosh. I'm hearing that dating apps just basically don't work anymore. People are giving up on them.
I mean, I don't know. I've met people who've sworn them off, but then they end up going back to them. Yeah. So I think they probably have peaked, but they're still around. It's like wokeness. It's peaked, but it's still around. People are still
in the universities.
It's still the air. Yeah,
the dating apps are still in the humanities departments. Okay. Well, I want to shift gears a little bit. You're so popular on Substack that I asked some Substack folks if they had questions for you, because you have so many fans, and a couple of people asked about something I wanted to ask you about anyway, which is the Zoran Mamdani moment. You've relatively recently moved to New York, is that right? So you're there just in time. As Kevin asks, now that you're a New Yorker, he says, welcome Rob to New York. What do you think about Mamdani? His policies seem like the ultimate luxury belief. On the ground here in New York, it seems like he's going to win. Does Rob think that New York City will wake up once Mamdani gets in and has an ultra-left city council to back his plans?
Yeah, it's I'm alarmed. I just moved here about 8 months ago.
You're going to leave.
Yeah, I signed my lease in November of 2024, and then November of 2025, we're going to get a socialist mayor and he's like the worst of everything. Like weirdly, I think because he's super woke. You look at his Twitter and Instagram from 2020, and it was like, defunding the police is a queer feminist issue and that kind of thing. It was really like, it was more than the ordinary level of wokeness. It was into like weird, use the word queer liberation requires that we defund the police kind of stuff. And And so he's woke, but then he's also a socialist. I can handle one, like if you're sort of like socially not woke, but you have this sympathy for the working class, I can, maybe look past some of it. But or if you're woke but you're not a socialist and you have sort of sensible economic policies, and if it's for like kind of like if it's disguised, like the way that corporations pretend to be woke for their own economic self-interest.
If it's just sort of performative to kind of get through the day wokeness.
But he seems both. He seems like sincere in the wokeness and sincere in the socialism, worst of both worlds. So no, I'm really alarmed. I had a piece I cross-posted on my Substack about him and about how his policies are misguided. And it's strange to me because one reason I moved to New York, not the only reason, but one was that I thought that New York had this, kind of sensibility that was lacking in places like LA or San Francisco, where things can get bad here, but then eventually people come to their senses and they'll elect someone like Giuliani or someone like Bloomberg. And I never would have guessed that they would elect a socialist like this. It seems like, because you think like, oh, people are... How do I say it? I have conservative friends who are like, I can't wait for Mamdani to get elected because then people can watch New York as an example of these failed economic policies and what happens. And I think that, like, I live here, so I have an interest in that not happening. But I don't even think that if I didn't live here, I would agree with that because people don't seem to take cities as examples. No one took San Francisco's example and learned from it, it seems. Like New York, we could look at San Francisco and say, well, what happened? Oh, well, we shouldn't do that. New York is just going in their own crazy direction too.
San Francisco is cleaning up its act. I mean, I think San Francisco did learn from its lesson. They recalled Chesa Boudin, and I'm hearing, I think the last local election there was a sort of significant shift, and I'm hearing that the homelessness is less pronounced. I think all the homeless people have come down to Los Angeles because it's unbelievable here. But
and they have a moderate mayor now in San Francisco. The mayor's a moderate,
exactly.
But you're right. But they learned from their own mistake. I don't think you can learn from the mistakes of another city.
That's true.
Sadly,
that's right.
you have to do it. And so New York is about to possibly have to learn the lesson the hard way. It's just sad. Like my conservative friends who say, oh, we'll all get to see what happens to New York. And no one's going to learn anything from that. If you live in Nashville or Denver, whatever, I mean, those cities aren't as crazy, but it's not as if we're going to look at New York and say, oh, look what they did to themselves. We're not going to do that. I don't think people learn that way. I think, sadly, we're going to have to, you do it, you learn it through making your own catastrophic errors.
And I guess it's cyclical, right? Because, New York was bankrupt in the 1970s and into the early 80s. And, there was different, administrations came in and changed things in various ways. And I guess if you're like in your 20s, you have no idea about that. Like, I mean, it was sort of ever thus. I just remember, I lived in New York through the 90s, sort of late 80s, into 1999. I left, and it changed so dramatically. And I mean, I don't know if I should admit this on the air. I voted for Giuliani when he was running for a second term as mayor because I thought his governance had significantly improved my life as a young woman living in the city. I felt safer, just quality of life was different. And I remember it was the first time I'd ever voted for a Republican, and I was like really jazzed about it. And and of course he cut to what Giuliani is now. But I also remember, when I moved back to New York in 2015 or so, after having been gone for a long time, it was pretty Disneyfied at that time. Still, I mean, I don't think de Blasio hadn't come in quite yet. It was still the Bloomberg era. And then, within 3 or 4 years, things were really different. And I remember being on a subway and there was a homeless guy, acting crazy on the train. And I was sitting next to this, middle-aged Black woman who looked very working class or lower class. And she just turned to me and she said, I miss Bloomberg. And, exactly to your point, none of these policies do any good for the people that they purport to help. I mean, these are, it's not the working class and the lower class that want Zoran Mamdani.
Oh yeah, that was clear in the polling, the voter polling results that after Mamdani won the primary, the data showed that he won the upper middle class, essentially, especially white, college-educated, upper middle class voters, whereas ethnic working class New Yorkers did not show up for him, despite the fact that he claimed to be their champion, who was representing those people, but they weren't turning out for him in the same way or the way that he would have liked. So yeah, it's interesting, and I think that New York's changed a lot. It's very expensive here, and people who earn money and go to college tend to be, they tend to have luxury beliefs. They tend to vote for people like Mamdani. So yeah, I mean, in all likelihood, he's going to be the mayor. I hope it doesn't, it's not guaranteed, but yeah, I just moved here. I don't know how much longer I'll be staying.
Well, it's good for your brand, though. It's good for you. You can, you can be the resistance. Well, I mean, what do you imagine happening, though? I mean, are we talking about? I mean, the grocery store thing. I doubt that will materialize. There might be one pilot project, and then. Whatever.
I think they may have a pilot project, but I think it'll be something like San Francisco, just like a general social breakdown of public order, rise in homelessness, kind of relaxed attitudes around law enforcement. Mamdani was a defund the police guy. He's walking that back now, but it's very clearly for political reasons, and I think he doesn't like the cops, so I think he will find ways to get them to stand down, and yeah, it'll just be like a daily increased daily discomfort, especially for people who rely on public transport or work outside, and working class people who commute. It's going to be very uncomfortable for them.
Yeah. Well, speaking of cops, I don't know if you can answer this, but somebody says they love your writing. You're great. He says, I agree with most of Rob's views, except one. He calls support for drug legalization a, quote, luxury belief, but isn't prohibition itself what causes more harm to vulnerable communities? The violence, criminalization, and unsafe supply all seem worse than legalization. What might Rob respond to that?
Well, I mean, who's being arrested in those cases? I mean, I think it's perfectly fine to prosecute drug dealers. I mean, I know that drug dealers tend to come from low income, marginalized, downtrodden backgrounds, but the people they're dealing drugs to are also from those same communities. And I have more sympathy for the people who are purchasing or manipulated into purchasing drugs from dealers. I mean, by now, so many people are familiar. Everyone's watched The Wire, right? Like the way drug dealers operate. You give people, especially kids, if you can, free samples, try to get them hooked, get them to learn how much euphoria you'll experience from a hit of heroin or whatever. And I just have no sympathy for those people, despite the fact that they come from, those kinds of backgrounds. But yeah, I just, it doesn't affect them. It just affects them. It affects their kids. It affects the broader community. So yeah, I think, if I were a dictator for a day, I would have no issue just, finding ways to remove all drug dealers, confining them somewhere else, and, cutting off the supply of drugs altogether into these communities.
Okay, here's two questions that are good to end on. Jenna asks, does Rob have any ideas about what the emerging luxury beliefs are, or predictions about what the prominent luxury beliefs will be in 5 to 10 years?
Oh, it's so hard to predict because, again, I started writing about luxury beliefs in 2019, and I think if you had given me a list of possible luxury beliefs, defund the police would have been at the bottom. I would think no one's crazy enough to actually say, or no, abolish the police. That was the famous New York Times.
Did anybody really? Come on, was that just a posture though? Did anybody really want to abolish the police?
Did anyone want to? I don't know if they wanted to.
I mean, defund is different than abolish, right? So.
I think that there was a point in 2020 where people probably in their heart of hearts did. They got swept up in the mania of that year. Today, I mean, you see people, will acknowledge that abolishing would have been a mistake, defunding maybe, but yeah, I think that would have been at the bottom of my list. I have no sense for what the next one will be. it's hard. It's hard for me to even imagine. So yeah, well, it remains to be seen. There could be all kind. I guess like one that I don't have a strong confidence in this, but I'm guessing probably in the next 5 to 10 years, actual AI boyfriends and girlfriends will exist. And I think it's one thing, probably reasonable, moderate stance, that if you're a person who is disabled in some way, unable to meet people, unable to form real human relationships, it's difficult for you, then one of these is better than being lonely and feeling uncared for. But I could imagine, pieces in glossy magazines and the pages of our most esteemed newspapers saying, here's why everyone should have an AIGF or an AIBF, or, the case for abandoning humans for robots, or, I can easily see that headline in the New Yorker or something. So maybe
I thought you were going to say that, just automatically disparaging people who have like an AI boyfriend is a luxury belief. I mean, it's a privileged position, right? Because you're forgetting that some people don't have a choice. Yeah, that's can shift around.
And this is maybe more provocative, but if you are the higher in socioeconomic status you are, in the circles that you run in, generally, the easier people are to get along with. That's one way to put it, and easier to find a compatible partner. But if you are, kind of in a marginalized, low income, difficult area where there are fewer people that are easy to get along with, harder to find a partner, and you have a AI robot, especially if the price comes down, they become affordable. I could easily see, a lot of those neighborhoods just being decimated and people just living with their Android companion.
Oh my gosh. That's okay. So many scenarios I can cook up in my mind, in a wife beater. My robot's wearing like a wife beater shirt and, telling me to get back in the kitchen. I don't know what it is. Okay. Well, the
inner bicep tattoo.
Yeah. The second part of this question, and then we'll wrap up, is related to this. He says, how does Rob think AI will change higher education, the landscape for professional writers?
Oh, that's something I'm worried about too. I just had a conversation yesterday with a podcaster about this. And I said, podcasters are safer than writers right now because, no matter how good deepfakes get and, so on, I think it's just going to be harder to replicate audio and visual and free flowing conversation. And especially
you can't fake this level of amateurism. So that's what it is. Yes.
Right. Whereas writing, it's, you've already seen this, like Will Storr, a Substack writer who I really like, the author Will Storr, he wrote an interesting piece where he just collected various popular excerpts from popular Substack posts that have hundreds or thousands of likes and shares and so on. And they show all the fingerprints of being written by ChatGPT. And most readers aren't that sophisticated. If they see something that kind of confirms what they already believe or makes them feel something that they wanted to feel or whatever, that they don't really care if it was written by AI or a human, or if they don't know, they're not going to question it. So yeah, I think for maybe, this might be wishful thinking, but the fact that I predated AI, I've been writing since before AI, maybe I can escape, the getting drowned out by it. But for new writers, I think it's going to be tough to stand out and differentiate yourself, because now you're not just competing with other writers, which has always been hard, but now you're competing with robots. So it's going to be difficult next few years to see how people adjust.
Yeah, I always say if you see show notes that contain the words engaging or deep dive,
delving,
your Chat GPT is showing. Yeah, well, I think that's why people are gravitating toward, in-person events. There's just more stuff going on the ground. And I feel like that's kind of a luxury. It's a luxury to be able to get together in person with people. I don't know if it's a luxury belief, but it's kind of it feels like an indulgence. And speaking of which, you're going to be joining us at the Unspeakeasy weekend in October, which is like, this is an experiment for all of us. I don't think anybody's ever tried something like this, and I certainly haven't. So we have a number of speakers who are going to be with us, and you'll be in conversation with some folks and with me, and then we have our attendees. I don't know. We've got a lot of people signed up. We've got a few more spaces left, but limited group of people. And instead of a Q&A, it'll go quickly into a discussion. So people will be able to actually interact and talk with their intellectual heroes. So it's you and John McWhorter and Carol Hooven and Alana Newhouse from Tablet, Mike Pesca, Lisa Sullen Davis, amazing folks. So I'm so glad you're going to be with us. That's October 11th and 12th. And so people can go to the show notes to find out about that. So thank you for doing this, and thank you for agreeing to do that. And it's always great to talk with you, Rob. So hope we do it again soon.
Yeah. Thanks, Meghan. This has been great.
That was my conversation with social psychologist, political cultural commentator, and author Rob Henderson. His 2024 book is Troubled, a memoir of family, foster care, and social class, and you can find him on Substack. You can also find him, of course, at the Unspeakeasy co-ed extra special on steroids retreat that we just discussed. You can go to theunspeakeasy.com/NYC to find out about that, or just look in the show notes. Once again, I will also be in New York on September 3rd in conversation with novelist and columnist Lionel Shriver. That's at the Village Underground Comedy Club. We're going to be talking about my book, The Catastrophe Hour. I'm holding it up again. If you're watching on video, check the link in the show notes as well. And that's it. Thank you for being a paying subscriber, and thank you for listening. And I will be back next week with another super nuanced guest. See you then.